All right, judges ready? Timer? Any affirmative team? Yes. Roman. All right, well, Justin started his 2AC by talking about how we need to reform, that there's a fiscal crisis facing the United States. However, that fiscal crisis does not justify tax increases, and history proves this. When I'm doing my first negative rebuttal, or my last speech of the round, is take a look back at the arguments I made in my first speech, starting with the harm. Now, well, I'd first like to point out the argument about how we need reform. The specific timeline that the piece of evidence gave was that of 10 years. So Congress does have 10 years to get their act together and reduce spending, so it's not such an imminent crisis as the affirmative team would like you to believe. Now let's go to their harm. I argue that, first of all, tax hikes aren't merited, and all they said that was that we can't wait. This wasn't actually a response to my argument. My argument was that empirics show us from the Eurozone about how when countries face a fiscal crisis, it was because they increased taxes, which harmed their economy and thus decreased revenue. This wasn't actually a response to my argument. My argument was saying that tax hikes only harm the state of the fiscal crisis, not help it. So this actually wasn't responding to my argument. Then, in response to my argument of unrealistic scenario, he said that the National Commission on Fiscal Responsibility and Reform couldn't come together with a plan. Firstly, that plan got a majority in the super committee. They just didn't get the supermajority that they needed to send to Congress. However, secondly, that plan was very controversial. The Bull-Simpson plan did a lot of stuff that some people didn't like, and Congress didn't want to do those kind of spending cuts. However, thirdly, Congress has proven that they can act under pressure. Last summer in 2011, when Congress was facing a fiscal crisis, they were able to act under pressure and decrease spending. The affirmative team agreed with this. Therefore, they agree that history proves that when a fiscal crisis does become imminent, Congress is able to reduce spending and avoid the fiscal crisis without increasing taxes and harming the economy. Let's turn to harm to volatility. He read a piece of evidence from the Institute for Development Studies, and he said that speculators and high-frequency traders are different. The study that I read was specifically about the high-frequency traders, the hyper-speculators in the market, as to whether or not they increase volatility. So his response doesn't actually address my argument. My argument was that a governmental agency that actually regulates the markets and does studies on the markets said that these hyper-speculators, these high-frequency traders, do not cause volatility. I'd actually value our source over there, as given ours is a governmental agency, and theirs is some think tank that they couldn't really give us many credentials for. So with that in mind, let's turn to the solvency. He said that, on the argument that mostly high-frequency traders are in UK, he said that the UK had a different tax, and that it was a different tax on stocks, and it wasn't on bonds and derivatives and equities, etc., etc. So I have two responses. First, double bind. Double bind. Either the United Kingdom tax is not like the US tax that the affirmative is proposing, so they have no empirics for their plan. Or the UK tax is like the affirmative tax, and the affirmative plan will not be effective, given history shows us that the United Kingdom's FTT did not decrease high-frequency traders. So either they have no empirics, or they don't get their advantages. Secondly, however, stocks make up the majority of markets. That's just common knowledge. Most of markets is made up of stocks, and so even if the UK tax is just on stocks, that doesn't mean that this empiric doesn't apply. And either it does apply to the affirmative case and it's not effective, or it doesn't apply and they don't have their advantage. With that in mind, let's turn to my argument of counter-empirics. He said that they use different models, and I have two responses. First, the new model fails. The only time the new FTT model has been tried is in the United Kingdom. My evidence specifically said that it failed, and high-frequency trading is 77% of the market, so that doesn't apply. My second response is that they can shift headquarters. They can shift headquarters. Now, the way the United States tax system works is there are a lot of loopholes which enables companies to simply shift their headquarters to another country. Now, high-frequency traders are not independent. They're filed with a company. So if the company valued high-frequency trading enough to try and avoid it under the affirmative plan, which the affirmative team claims that they love high-frequency trading, they would just shift their headquarters to another country. Thus, they wouldn't have to face the tax under the affirmative plan. This is a big loophole in the U.S. tax code that the affirmative team doesn't affect with their plan. Now, to an argument that spending will increase against Advantage 1. They said that political gridlock prevents new spending. My response is sense of security. Sense of security. Now, the affirmative plan is going to give these politicians a sense of security. They're going to believe that they have enough revenue now, they don't need to do anything, so they're just going to increase spending. Now, this, first of all, has been proved by history, but second of all, my argument wasn't that it's necessarily going to happen now. This was actually asked by Mikayla in cross-examination. She asked, will it happen in short-term or long-term? Really, it doesn't matter when it happens. All that matters is that it's going to happen. Thus, the affirmative plan's revenue will not go toward decreasing the deficit, meaning they will not avoid the fiscal crisis. Then the argument about how FTT leads to increased spending, all they said was that the UK endorsed this. My evidence was actually specific to the United States about what the United States has endorsed for FTT, so it actually applies very, very much. Then finally, they didn't address my argument. I asked for quantification as to how much they were these high-frequency traders and how much effect that has on the revenue. They didn't address this in their last speech. Therefore, the affirmative team hasn't quantified either of their advantages. The harms aren't there, the advantages are there. So we asked for a negative ballot at the end of the round. Thank you so much.